everybody. Welcome back to the Bros and Cons podcast, where today we'll be looking at episode 7 of The Last of Us called Left Behind. I want to start off by talking about the DLC of The Last of Us called Left Behind that came out, I think, a year after The Last of Us came out.
Not even a year, actually.
Was it like 6 months?
It was February 14th, 2014.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sorry, I remember that.
And how long ago was that after The Last of Us came out?
Oh, it came out, I think, in, don't quote me on it, but I think it came out in July or August 2013.
Okay, cool. So this, yeah, actually, let's fact check.
June 14th, 2013. I was a month off.
Okay.
So yeah, 8 months to the day.
No, to me, I was, as we've talked about before, I was heavy into gaming when The Last of Us first came out, and this felt kind of revolutionary because it was a DLC that wasn't just, oh, let's have a little extra of something here. It was a full story, a fully realized story.
Yeah, like it completely contributed to the plot of the game. Like really, it's like it really isn't something that's excludable at all. Like it really does give so much context and character details that you really can't skirt by, and it's completely integral, not just to like Ellie's story, but I feel like kind of like to part 2 in that sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so important. And before then, like DLCs were just, I feel like, completely like something you could write off and not even have to play, because it just didn't really give any plot value necessarily to them.
Although my favorite side note, my favorite DLC that I've ever played, even though this is brilliant, was Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare.
Oh no.
Did you ever play it?
I didn't play it.
It like picked up after the end of Red Dead Redemption, and it was just zombies.
I was gonna say, that sounds terrifying.
It was so good. Anyway, but that's sort of like that's what I can expect from a DLC, right. And this was just completely different.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I haven't played that many DLCs, but the one I have enjoyed that's not The Last of Us was Mass Effect 3.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's just fun. Because that game is, like, just constant, like, things going down and going wrong, and it's, like, nice to see all the characters just, like, having a good time for once.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You know,
oh, man, I need to pick up Last of Us, or Mass Effect again.
I gave it to you.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
I'm looking at the cover for it right now. Anyway,
yeah,
I didn't have any doubt that they would put this story in the show. But it's, again, just smart decision making. I think it was perfect for them to do.
I do too. Yeah,
they had to.
Yeah.
So hopping back to the show, we open on just the immediate events of last episode. We see just good acting. Now, riddle me this, bro. Yeah. In the game, did we see Ellie working on Joel at all? I can't remember.
Yeah, so in the opening of the DLC, she uses her palm tree shirt and uses it to bandage him with duct tape, and then goes out and looks for antibiotics and just like something to treat him with. So pretty much, I mean, kind of the same thing, because she leaves him there with a rag. So
yeah, I had forgotten that we saw her working on him, because I just remember the antibiotics. It's been a little while since I played
but the difference here is he actually tells her to go. Like in the games, he's pretty much just,
he's just out of it
the whole time. But here he like tells her to go and get back to Tommy and take his gun and the horse and everything and just leave him and just accept that he's dying and going to die. And that's where it flashes back to why she decides not to give up on him.
This was a fun little bit of editing, her reaching out for the door, touching the doorknob, and then we flash back.
Yeah. I saw some meme and it said Ellie going through a flashback while Joel is bleeding out. It's just him like dying for 40 minutes while she's just standing there making a decision.
Which is a thought I had later in the night that I thought was funny too.
Yeah.
She's just
It's stupid, but it's kind of
but it makes me laugh. Anyway, so good little bit of editing, and we're transported to something that we've never seen before, which
Right.
is Ellie inside Fedra School.
Right, which has always been something I've kind of wanted to see,
Yeah.
and I love that they actually gave us a little bit more of that now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just
A little.
really, because she didn't she didn't have friends really aside from
Mm-hmm.
Riley, so it's cool to see like just her dynamic with other people that
Mm-hmm.
are her age, and clearly it's what you'd expect. Like she doesn't get
Yeah.
along, so.
And this too was like a good, because we've been talking this entire time about how Ellie's such a kid,
Hmm.
and I feel like in we're seeing her kind of be able to be. This is why she's able to be a kid, is
Hmm.
because it's like a relatively, despite all the implications of the world outside, um, it's like we're seeing a relatively standard high school experience.
Right.
High
Yeah,
school
like
experience.
as much as you can in this kind of world. Like she
Exactly.
seems to have like a pretty decent grounded upbringing, all things considered. And I know,
Yeah,
I
you have
mean,
a bully, you beat the shit out of them, you get in trouble. I thought this was also interesting to see. We get another glimpse of a humanizing of Fedra. We got it
mhm,
in the first episode when the little kid comes in and the
right.
Fedra soldier comforts him. I like the actor that they used for what was his rank?
Uh, Officer?
Okay.
I don't think he has a specific rank. He's an officer.
I like that actor a lot, and
Hmm.
I like the dialogue that they gave him. He acknowledges that Ellie is too smart for this shit. That she could have a really promising career. Again, an oddly normal life.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So I thought I thought that they did more with this in like a very small time period. So I thought that this did more in a very brief amount of time than I expected.
Yeah, it really did. Like it made good use of whatever short 5-ish, 8 minutes or whatever that was, to show that bit of that story that I think we all have kind of like needed.
Hmm.
I think it was important to see all of that and how
Yeah.
she handled that and just her other life experience.
I also just for like set dressing purposes, I really like the way that they did her room.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed seeing that, like everything that she's into as much as she can be. I mean,
Hmm.
because she's got posters of all these like movies and games and things like that, but
In
she's
space.
space, but she's probably never seen them, and she only knows what she's reading in books or media that she's like finding around the city. So it's
Exactly.
really really cool to see that she still has like these interests as much as she's allowed to and able to, even
Hmm.
though like they're it's like a longing for them, I guess.
Also interesting, I don't like using this word, but interesting juxtaposition to see that versus what the kids get and kids her age get in Jackson.
Yeah, very different. Like they actually do get to watch movies there, and they actually
Mhm.
like get to go to school and come home to their families and then have these different activities that they can go to. Like it's an entirely different lifestyle.
They're doing really interesting things in this show that I didn't necessarily expect, which is showing so many different ways of life in
Hmm.
this post-apocalyptic world. We see the hermits, the older couple living out in the middle of nowhere. We see Jackson. We see the QZs, both the QZ where Joel was and Kansas City. The difference is there. We're seeing this Fedra school inside of QZ. It's interesting world building that
Hmm.
I didn't 100% expect from this show.
Right. Yeah.
So this is where when Ellie goes back to her room, this is where we meet Riley.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that they kept the entrance the same. I feel like almost everything about this episode was near identical,
Mm-hmm.
but I liked that the acting was so much more nuanced.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Storm Reed was an excellent choice of actor for Riley.
Hmm.
She's got this like inherent she's got an energy to her, you know what I
She
mean?
does. Yeah.
And I really like that actress, and I thought
Me
she was
too.
perfect for Riley.
Yeah, as soon as I heard they picked her, I was like, yeah, she's absolutely perfect for this role.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I was really happy with that casting choice. I mean, I was
Yeah.
happy with pretty much every casting choice, but
Yeah, I know, me too.
like, I have no
They
complaints.
haven't, I don't think that they've made a wrong step yet
No.
with the casting of anybody yet.
Me neither. Yeah.
My opinion. My opinion. Mhm.
So yeah, so there's the moment when Ellie tells Riley to turn around, and Riley like calls her out on it too. She's like, "You're so weird about that."
Yeah.
But I feel like there's still like a little tension between them
Hmm.
as they're turned away from each other.
But it didn't do the typical Hollywood thing, I don't think, where they like dolly into the person who's turned around their face and you can see someone blurry in the background changing and they're going and it's like super overt, and
Right.
that's a trope that you see across all forms of fucking
It's so
media.
tropey. Yeah, it kind
Yeah,
of took that trope and did it a little differently. Or like they like you're so used to seeing them like catching a glimpse of a reflection in like the window or the mirror or something.
yeah, or this shot, but they're already done changing and the tension's gone.
Exactly. Yeah, like it didn't do that. It just made a scene that was like it just made a scene a little awkward.
Yes,
For
but
you to initially
that's
catch
teenage
on.
girls.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's the awkwardness. It's the awkwardness of teenage folks in love,
Yeah.
and they don't want to admit it.
Well, even just in
Natural
general
tension.
too. Like I'm
Natural
trying to
tension. Give me that natural tension. You think about all of the changes that your body is going through, the hormones that are changing, the everything is changing in that time of your life.
Right.
And that's one of the beautiful things about this episode is it captures it in a really naturalistic way.
Yeah. Riley's also like 2 years older than Ellie too. So it's like that gives another layer of Ellie being insecure about her body, I think, is not only does she have a crush on this girl is like 2 years is a pretty big age gap.
Yeah.
When
For
you're
that
14.
time of your life.
Yeah, it is a pretty
100%.
huge age gap. Like that's like,
Yeah.
crush a middle schooler crushing on a high schooler practically.
Yeah, and I think
so.
I think that plays so much into Ellie's fear too, is like she so admires Ellie, or she so admires Riley.
Yeah.
And everything about Riley, so of course that there's like that's another layer to it. So I want to skip ahead to when they find the dead body in the sort of tunnel situation, and I like the difference between Ellie's reaction and I almost called her Storm, and Riley's reaction.
Yeah.
Ellie is so smart, and she understands humanity, I think, better than she gives herself credit for, or Joel gives her credit for up until this point. That she knows this guy has committed suicide. But also this little psycho, she laughs when the body falls through the floors.
Yeah.
And it's just such a it's there we get to see, even though we've talked about that it's like a normalcy to this Fedra school, here we get to see where life is completely different, that a kid can laugh at a dead body falling through floors instead of being horrified by it.
Right. Like to that, like to her, it's just like that's like a part of life.
Exactly. She's not really a psycho. This is just
That's
normal stuff for her.
Like you hear about it all the time, and I'm sure they see it every now and then too. But meanwhile, you got Riley, who's had a different relationship with death in her young life so far already, and she's kind of like she doesn't respond quite the same way that Ellie does.
Exactly. It's completely possible that Ellie hasn't seen a lot of dead bodies. Like this life is normal to her, but that's also just she's a little more detached than Riley is, who she said in the episode she saw her, was it her sister?
Her mom
that died, and her mom?
Just her
parents.
Her parents. Yeah.
Her parents were dead, and so she's got a completely different reaction to it, and it's just a good character moment for both of them, I thought.
Yeah, definitely.
So I want to talk about when they get to the mall, and a good character piece too is when Riley's one of the few I feel that can just handle Ellie. Like she gets Ellie and she can she can make her take direction the way that nobody else can.
Right.
She's like, get your ass up those stairs, go through the door, turn right, and stand there.
Yeah. Also,
Trust me.
Ellie just wants so badly to impress her.
Mm-hmm.
Like when she takes, because we know from the other episode where she takes a swig of the alcohol that Joel gives her, she's like disgusted by it. She can't keep a straight face. Whereas here, it's like she's constantly like trying to choke this thing down.
Yeah.
And she's like trying to act really cool about it, but you know she like hates it and she can't handle it.
And the second she goes through that door too, like she's gonna follow what Riley says, but the second she goes through the door, you see that she's scared.
Yeah. Yep.
And I want to talk about that shot. The center punch shot. Silhouette shot.
Yep.
Of all the lights in the mall coming on.
It's so good. So apparently it was a complete CG shot. Mm-hmm. So she's just standing, I think, on like a blue screen or green screen or something like that. But her acting and the way the lights come on, and you just see them coming on, and her reaction to the lights, it's just so good.
It's beautiful.
Love it. Like that's cinema magic right there in every sense of the word. I love it so much.
Yeah, me too. It again, kudos to Bella Ramsey for bringing subtlety to a character that you could have gone really overboard with.
And I do think that this episode might have had some of her best acting so far. I mean, her acting was on point this time around. It was just, again, like nuanced. Like everything about her performance and also Storm Reed's performance in this episode was just so nuanced.
They were so good at clearly holding something back the entire time, but doing it in very different ways.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the way that they captured the magic of first love.
Yeah.
It's an intangible feeling. And these actors, this writing, this cinematographer captured everything beautifully.
Yeah. It was just, what's the word I'm looking for? It was beautifully shot, and like everything about it, I think, felt a little dreamlike, I guess.
Yeah, like that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah,
like just the lighting and like the pacing and the way it kind of like flowed, like everything about it was just kind of like they captured that feeling and portrayed that feeling so well.
And it's also completely different. It's a completely different look from anything we've seen so far in this show. Everything is earth toned and natural, and this, that, and the other thing, but suddenly we're in this dream world. We're caught in this fever dream that, Riley and Ellie are sharing.
Yeah, like everything is so colorful. Like when you go like to the carousel or like the arcade, it's like there's all these colors and little moments that just are completely different than anything that's been seen or like shot.
Yeah. And it's so kid-like, it's so childlike, but not in like a babyish way, in just a dreamy way.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I want to talk about what we just figured out was that the cinematographer was a woman.
Yeah. Also, the director was a woman.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to bring up is the female perspective in a story like this. Sometimes it's hard to point to a specific reason why it's different or why it's important to have a female perspective. And I think this is an episode that can do that.
Right. And I think we do have a good comparison here when you look at the video game version, which was directed by Neil Druckmann. And, I love that in his podcast, like they still put so much care into like the queer experience and saying how that differs from a straight, crush as a teenager. Like just the subtle differences and the things that might go through someone's head that are completely different and societally completely different and complex, that add all these layers of stress and tension and anxiety, I think, to going through something like that. And I think that Neil was just like very conscious of that, and like he referenced like the friends he had growing up that would tell him about their own experiences differing from his own. So I think he put a lot of care into when he directed it and was very respectful and conscious of that. But I do think we got to see something much more nuanced and accurate in this sense. I don't know if the director is LGBT herself, but like just having that woman's perspective on how teenage girls go through something like that versus guys. Like I think there's still a difference there, and I think she just really captured all of that beautifully.
Absolutely. So what Vico is talking about is in this latest episode of their podcast, Neil Druckmann talked very specifically about there's a different kind of fear there when it's a queer relationship versus a queer first love, even versus a straight first love, straight relationship. And I absolutely agree with you. It's still there was a difference here. This episode made me feel it. Made me feel the different tension, the different fear roiling inside of both of these girls. And I think that's because they were able to be a lot more nuanced.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how both have been handled so much the same, but just so differently. Like it's, I think in the game version, I feel like there was definitely something there, but it was very subtle. Very, very subtle in comparison to all the little glances and looks and moments in the show where it's like I feel like it's obvious almost from the get-go.
Yeah.
You know, whereas in the show I think there's like the little moment in the photo booth and just like a couple looks here and there, but it is very subtle, and you can you almost get the idea that more that like they're just really good friends. Whereas in the show, it's like from the get-go, you're just like there's so much like tension between these two girls that are trying to suppress these feelings they have for one another.
Yeah, one thing that I haven't seen as well depicted, I think, is like this push and pull that you have with a first love, a first crush, of like, "Ooh, don't touch me, that scares me," and I want to show off for you kind of thing.
Right.
That like you want something so bad, but don't touch me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I haven't seen that as well. And of course, I haven't seen all movies. I haven't seen all media, but this was the best that I've seen it depicted. I just think that especially when it comes to teenagers and like teenage girls, I'm looking at you, Euphoria. It can be a little blustery. It can be a little bit like taken so far that it becomes unrelatable.
Sure.
And this showed it in a way that I have not seen. I haven't seen as well depicted.
Yeah, I feel like this was much more grounded. In that regard, where I think I guess Hollywoodized or like dramatized is the word I'm looking for, where it doesn't have that same coming of age capture that's a little more authentic and raw that I think the show captured a little bit better than a lot of other media.
Yeah, you got there with your point, and I am on board for it 100%. Yeah.
There's a few layers to that scene that I love, where she's like moving stairs. She doesn't even know what, or she calls them electric stairs. Like she doesn't even know what an escalator is.
Yeah.
It cracks me up.
As just a small town girl, I can say because this is a family story, coming from a small town, like the first time that I was cognizant enough to ride an escalator, that was me. That was my reaction, like completely blown away at Les, like a 4-year-old or whatever, coming to the big city and riding an escalator for the first time. I'm like, what?
That's so funny. But it's like true. It's like as a kid, there's these things that are sometimes everyday things for some people, but like completely novel to children. And this was one of those things where it's like this of a bygone era thing to her now, and it's like, oh, this is amazing, and she's just got this childlike joy that she just kind of like exudes as she goes on an escalator for the first time.
Yeah.
And then going into that, it's like she also kind of uses it as an excuse to like make physical contact with Riley.
Oh yeah.
Kind of like throws herself on her, but at the same time, like she can't commit to it.
Well, she can't do it in a normal way, which 100% relatable.
Right.
Like, oops. It's just good.
Yeah.
Because like I can remember doing that. I can remember doing that dumb shit. Like as a kid who's in love with someone, like probably now in love with someone. Like it made sense. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that
For
was
sure.
like your first hint. If you didn't know about The Last of Us, you knew what was going on by that moment, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, kind of I feel like almost back to back, they were really just focusing on their dynamic relationship
Hmm.
crush aspect of this episode. Like it really went from just being like a minor note in the DLC to like the overall thread tying this entire episode together, which I
Hmm.
really liked. Like that was kind of like I feel like at the time, I think the big takeaway from the game,
Yeah.
even though it was just such a minor note at the end. Like I remember seeing videos of like I remember seeing one specifically of a streamer at the time, and she, as soon as that happened, she set down her controller and started crying because
Yeah.
she felt seen.
Yeah.
And I'm like that's why this is important.
Yes.
It just makes a huge difference.
That's the power of these games, is like, even before these bigger discussions about representation
Hmm.
were happening, this game, this DLC part 2, they came along.
Yeah, yeah. It especially in 2014. Like
Hmm.
obviously, I mean, it was still at a pretty progressive time, but like um gay marriage wasn't even legal yet across
Hmm.
the states. So it
Hmm.
really was, I think, kind of bold of them to still do that and make it such a pivotal character point.
Yes, it wasn't just a side note. It's like this, they're showing that this is a core part of this main character's identity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And going into that, so we go into the Victoria's Secret scene where they
Hmm.
kind of have this little exchange where Riley's like, I don't get it. I love Ellie's like, do you need me to explain it to
Explain it
you?
to
And
you.
she almost gets kind of excited by the idea of explaining it to her.
Yeah.
But Riley's like, of course I know. Like,
Yeah.
why? She's like, it just seems uncomfortable. I'm like, I get that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 30 and I still think the idea of wearing a thong looks uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never doing that.
Yeah.
But so just their little exchange, and then like Riley makes a point to say, I was imagining you in that, which is such a bold like
Hmm.
move, I
Hmm.
think, on her part.
But it was still like
Dipping the
dipping a toe in
toe.
the water. Yeah.
Yeah. Like because you do see this a little bit more from Ellie's perspective and how she's crushing, but
Hmm.
you still have these moments where you see that Riley is just as insecure and
Hmm.
trying to also make those moves on Ellie and
Yeah.
kind of like nudge her, like trying to get a reaction to see where she stands.
Yeah.
So,
And neither of them are really giving, like when, because they keep pushing each other, and neither is really giving,
no.
which is cool to see.
Yeah, it's funny. But that's where then Ellie stands in front of the mirror and she's like checking her hair
Yeah.
and stuff like
So cute.
it's like my wife Marcy said she's what did she say? She's like, Boo, you got a black eye. Like you're getting your hair out of your eyes isn't doing you any favors. And that leads right into what I think is one of the most beautifully shot scenes
Hmm.
is the carousel scene.
Hmm.
Um, which in the game, when they originally show the lights coming on for the first time, they burst out into where the carousel is, and it's like such a
Right.
beautiful first shot. But I love how they did it in this adaptation too. Like it's so good.
Hmm.
But I think it's kind of like a famously beautiful scene in that regard. Like it's another reveal. But yeah, Riley uses this as another excuse to like make physical contact with her by saying,
Hmm.
"Close your eyes and give me your hand."
Yeah.
And it's just like that's another moment. I love how in the scene, like the whole time they're on the carousel, Ellie is just like can't take her eyes off of Riley.
Yeah.
Like it's just such a cute little moment. I feel like I mean you really see that like she just is in love with her.
Yeah.
Um,
Completely infatuated with her.
yeah,
And uh once again, kudos to Bella Ramsey, because it was just good. You felt
it's
every second of that carousel ride.
Yeah, like her acting in this episode, like you know exactly what she's thinking and feeling
Mm-hmm.
based off of just her facial expressions, and it's such good acting.
Such good acting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so after the carousel breaks down,
Hmm.
um, we get one of the most iconic moments from the DLC, which
Hmm.
is the photo booth.
Right. You went Canadian again.
I did. Okay. I'm hungry. All right. Ooh, ooh. I'm like, my mouth just started watering because I remembered I have pizza roll stuff.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So after the carousel breaks down, we get one of the most iconic moments from the DLC, which is the photo booth.
Hmm.
And why do you think that that was so important for them to include in the show?
I mean, yeah, because it really was like a kind of like a game mechanic
Hmm.
where you'd like pick your different things and whatnot. But I think it's like another one of those classic mall experiences that like a
Yeah.
lot of teenagers have. And again, it's kind of tropey,
Yeah.
but it's cool to, it's such a novel way to see them kind of going through some of these tropey things
Hmm.
in a post-apocalyptic setting. Like
Yes.
there, I can't think of any other type of media that's necessarily done that in
Hmm.
like a post-apocalyptic setting where they're kind of going through the old world, exploring things together in this kind of way.
Yeah.
So it's like it's cool to see like their experience of it versus the expected like tropey experience of it. Like for them it's like, what do we do, you know? And
Hmm.
like it was definitely an ad in the DLC, but I love that they're like, you can share to Facebook, and they're
Yeah.
like, what's a Facebook? You know, like just little
Yeah.
things like that where this world is so foreign to them, but they're loving exploring it and figuring it out.
And did you appreciate the fact that the film wasn't exposed correctly because it's old ass film?
Oh yeah, that was really cool. Like yeah,
Yeah.
just completely like expired and
Yeah.
not working. And it's cool that like I wonder if they'll revisit that or show that again at some point
Yeah.
in the
Because
end. Because
one thing
Ellie
we
kept it.
haven't one thing we haven't seen yet is the photo of Joel and Sarah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which was a big point in the game. So I'm wondering if we'll see either of those again at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really curious about that. But again, like they kind of go into that where they're making close physical contact, and it's another excuse for them to be like that with one another. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like they can't handle it either.
Yeah, especially Ellie. Ellie
Yeah.
cannot handle it. Like,
Yeah.
I think this is a moment where this is like a little bit of a turning point because Riley was gonna just stay there,
Hmm.
and Ellie's like, "Oh no,
Right. Get off me.
I can't handle this." Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in a DLC in a video game full of iconic moments, this is another iconic moment, which is the arcade.
Yeah.
And another personal anecdote is when I was a kid, the big thing to do when we were like in middle school was
Hmm.
go to the casino,
Hmm.
like 15 minutes away from where I live. The group of us would go to the casino, not to gamble, obviously, but
Right.
the big things there were the bowling alley and the arcade. And
Hmm.
the way they captured the feeling of going into an arcade was unbelievable. It was
Yeah.
it was perfect
Right.
for
Yeah.
me.
Like for me too, because it's like I grew up going to a mall all the
Yeah.
time. Like that looks a lot like, I mean, a lot of malls look the same, but like the layout of this one and everything was just like it feels so nostalgic for me.
Yeah.
And the big thing I would do, like from like 96 to like 2000, I think it was around 2003 or 2004 actually that they like took the arcade out actually.
Yeah.
But like I went as much as I could. Like that was what I looked forward to, is every time I went to the mall, I wanted to go to the arcade.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was like this mall was like a big part of my life as a kid. And so
Yeah.
to see them like kind of like freaking out about all the things that I got excited about as a kid, just like walking through, like I don't know, it's something about this whole part of the story is so nostalgic for me.
Yeah.
Even though I was definitely younger than they were, I was like from like ages like 4 till 11 or 12
Hmm.
when I was like obsessed with the arcade and able to go to the arcade a lot.
Hmm.
But it's just there's something about the sound and the lighting and everything that's so nostalgic about the arcade specifically.
Yeah, there's like a buzz.
Mm-hmm.
There's a buzz to
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah.
This doesn't have to go in, but the closest mall to me was the one in Prescott.
Yeah.
Did not have an arcade.
Oh no.
So like I I have a lot of nostalgia around the mall in Prescott too. Like
Mm-hmm.
when we were in high school, that was our big thing.
Right.
But it was like the Prescott Mall. So it wasn't as like grand and cool
Yeah.
as a lot of malls. Like, when I got a little older, it was malls in Phoenix and stuff like Christown.
Yeah.
Was like the family mall was Christown back when it was like a little shinier, a little bit less sketch. So this was really cool to me, but in different ways, because my experience was the arcade and the casino, but it still
Yeah.
captures
It's
that
the same feel, you
spirit.
know? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah, something about the way it was shot was so nostalgic itself. Like the way it
Hmm.
kind of like pans and like tracks across some of the different games, and then like the way the noises come in and out. Like
Yeah.
you could tell this scene was just really made with love, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because the creators are like, one loves video games, the other literally makes video games for a living.
Hmm.
So there was something just so well done about it, and I love the lighting of this entire sequence too. With just how they like this is a little like more technical and nerdy, but like they
Yeah.
balance the skin tones really well with all these like blue and purple colors. Also, they used bisexual lighting,
Hmm.
which is a
Yeah, I
thing.
saw that. Yeah, I saw that on I probably Reddit.
Yeah, like that's definitely like a strong theme. Like bisexual lighting isn't always, I feel like it's not always used with bi people specifically. It's just with anything to represent LGBT, maybe because the color scheme works really well. I
Yeah.
don't know why, but like I see it used like, quite often um, for things like that.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm glad that you brought up, because it's so detail oriented, so detail
Mhm.
rich. This show that you just have to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many, like, I want to do even another rewatch of this episode because there's so many little Easter eggs and like nuanced things and hidden things within this episode that are
Hmm.
just really powerful.
I was half expecting, just because my mind was so in the video game, I was half expecting there to be like an Uncharted pinball machine game.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they didn't, because that would have taken me out. But because of like the little Easter eggs that you get in the
Right.
video games themselves, I was half expecting them to do it.
Yeah, and that still wouldn't make sense either because it came out in like '07, I think.
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah.
But not a lot of it would have made sense in the video game either, but they put those Easter eggs in. So the biggest difference here in this scene versus the video game is, in the video game, the game that Ellie really wants to play doesn't work. So she has
Yeah,
Ellie close her eyes, and she makes up a story about what's happening in the
that's
video game,
right. Mm-hmm.
which is a game mechanic, or a playthrough mechanic itself, because I think it's just like you're pressing the buttons while it's
Mm-hmm.
happening. But it wouldn't have worked in the show, but man, I loved it in the video
Yeah, it was
game.
so
The
good.
light changes on her face.
Yeah.
You get sucked into the story. The sound effects from the game that Riley's describing
Mm-hmm.
come in. It's a really beautiful moment. But I don't think it would have worked in the show.
Not as well, no. And I think it's cool that they actually got to play it themselves instead of
Yes.
just pretend to play it. It's
Yeah.
definitely, I think, just I don't know. I like that they were given that
Me too.
moment of happiness in their lives.
Yeah.
Same with like the carousel actually in the game stops working before Riley even gets on it, so only
Hmm.
Ellie gets to ride it. And then like in the photo booth, it's out of paper in the
Yeah.
game, so they don't actually get any photos even though they took photos. So it's like these little like bits of happiness of this night that they're actually given versus in the game like they just got none of that. I mean, they
Yeah.
still had fun, but
Yeah.
it just wasn't quite the same. And
They get like tokens, almost, of
mhm,
like figurative tokens of the night.
yeah, exactly. The other
Okay,
thing that's
keep going.
different in the game versus the show is the game they seem to have either been to the mall before or like visited nearby because
Right.
there's a guy stationed there that they've visited before and they know that he's posted there. So it's interesting to see that difference, whereas it doesn't seem like the like Fedra is kind of like stationed in the mall just with that one guy who's
Yeah.
like this aging guy that rides a horse, and that's why Ellie's ridden a horse before in the game. That's why she's like got these different familiarities with certain things versus in the show Riley is posted there versus this
Yeah.
guy. So they've got a Firefly posted there. And then also
Something that you just brought up, that I just thought of, interesting, the sort of the lies that Fedra tells to sort of maintain control. Fedra said that the mall was overrun with infected.
right.
Same thing in Kansas City, all the maintenance tunnels were overrun with
Mhm.
infected, but it's not true.
Right. Yeah,
That's
it's
not
not.
something I think we've brought up before.
No, yeah, so it's all these little tidbits. Whereas, like, I think in the show, Riley says that the Fireflies cleared them all, and that's why they kind of use it as an outpost. So interesting little just differences and dynamics. And like another thing that's interesting that still is like something that's kind of recurring here, and it's a big
Mhm.
difference between the game and the show, is that Riley and Ellie both know Marlene in the game. Whereas in the show,
Right.
Riley comes across, or Marlene comes across Riley, and Ellie has no idea who Marlene is. So I
Right.
think that's such an interesting difference because in the game, she's like asking Marlene, like, has Marlene talked about my mom or anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
Ellie knows Marlene knew her mother. And so there's kind of like that connection between Ellie and Marlene, whereas here, like, it's just a little more empty. So it's interesting to see that
Yeah.
difference.
I mean, she didn't even know who Marlene was when,
No,
because I think she outright
she
asked.
says, yeah, she asks, who's Marlene? Like, she has
Yeah.
no idea.
While we get to revel in this sweet story,
Mm.
we see that there's a stalker growing in the walls who's awakened by their um laughter.
Yeah, which I thought was a really interesting creative choice to reveal this ahead of time. And it kind of
Yeah.
like makes the rest of the episode that much more tense.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, very really interesting decision. So
I
you
think,
yeah, you just you know it's coming.
yeah, we as the audience again are put on a clock,
Mhm.
which is sort of a recurring theme here
Yeah.
in the
Mhm.
in the show itself.
Yeah, and just adds this layer of tension. But yeah, so then it cuts back to them just kind of, finishing up the game and everything, and that's where they have another moment where you see Ellie almost gets brave enough to
Mm-hmm.
kiss Riley in like a
Mm-hmm.
moment of celebration, and then you
Yeah.
see her regret that she let the moment slip by so
Yeah.
hard.
She's getting there. She's there. Both of them are getting bolder and bolder as the episode goes on.
Yeah, but they're still just so restrained,
Yeah.
you know. And that's when Ellie is kind of like, she's like, I should go. It's getting late. It's almost like she's resigned to the fact that nothing else is gonna happen between
Hmm.
them at this point.
Yeah.
But then,
And also Ellie probably thinks that she was able to sneak into Ellie's room so easily. She can do it again.
yeah, exactly.
Like this isn't the last night that we'll have.
Right. That's probably what she's thinking at this point.
Hmm.
But then Riley's like, I got you a present, so let's go check it out. And that's where we end up in another scene that things just kind of escalate
Hmm.
because you realize that Riley just hasn't like found this mall and decided to give her this night. Like the Fireflies put her here,
Hmm.
and they're like essentially using her as a child soldier slash guard,
Hmm.
and to guard all of the bombs that they've made. They're using to chuck at Fedra, and
Yeah.
that just adds this whole other layer of tension and like there's really no good guys here because
That's what I was about to say, is they're really good at establishing, and it's because they have more time for pure storytelling in the show.
yeah,
They're really good at establishing the good and bad between both Fedra and Fireflies.
yeah.
Uh and I think Ellie is starting this is where Ellie starts to see that.
Hmm.
But Riley reels her in with the pun book.
Right. Yeah. Because before before Ellie's was
Yeah. Yeah.
no, because before Ellie realizes that Riley's got a bunch of bombs in there, they do have this little moment with the pun book where they're able to like see volume 2
Mm-hmm.
and just tell a few jokes up until that moment of realization that Ellie figures out what's actually going on here. And
Yeah.
she's so upset by it because she just had this talk with the officer that told her, you can be the future, you can change things, you can be leading Fedra, or
Mm-hmm.
this, faction of Fedra.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I think,
Ellie's argument becomes, we can change things.
mhm, yeah,
You and I,
mhm,
we can lead this. We're the generation that's gonna
mhm,
enact change here. And Riley uh reveals to her that like that's not gonna happen.
mhm.
I would not be a leader in Fedra. I'll be on, maintenance duty, on shit duty.
Yeah, which is just really sad when you think
Mm-hmm.
about it. Like she's kind of been screwed from the jump and has no future,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately.
It's also interesting that they're establishing a little bit more of an ambiguity with Ellie, and her feelings towards both the Fireflies and Fedra.
Yeah.
I don't think she's ever liked Fedra. I think
Mm-mm.
she's miserable in Fedra, but she sees a path ahead with Fedra.
Right.
I think
Ellie,
this is
yeah.
where we see that she's afraid. She has reason to fear the Fireflies. Like Riley could be the one to kill me
Mm-hmm.
as a Firefly and
Yeah.
me as Fedra.
Yeah. It's like this reality of everything is kind of setting into her,
Mm-hmm.
where they could end up on other sides
Mm-hmm.
of just this future that's unfolding. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of scares her.
Yeah. One thing I want to jump back to though with the pun book is we're seeing that Ellie has totems. Like Ellie likes to collect things that remind her of a moment or remind her of a person. She's
Yeah.
got totems that she's
Mm-hmm.
carrying around with her.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, this kind of unfolds into an argument, and Ellie kind of tries to leave, and then that's when Riley tells her like, this is our last night
Mm-hmm.
together seeing each other because they're sending me away. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that really sets Ellie off,
Mm-hmm.
where she feels like Riley has chosen that over her.
Mm-hmm.
um, and she almost leaves her. I have to say, it kind of cracked me up when she punched the trash can.
Yeah.
And she just throws her arm into it, like her limp arm into it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why. It's such a sad, serious part.
I know, but I had the same reaction. I think this too, this is like this just speaks, this is how Ellie reacts to heartbreak.
Mm-hmm.
This is how Ellie reacts to abandonment. This is how Ellie reacts. Like it's the character consistency, the character continuity is so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And she starts heading back, and that's when she hears like this scream.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just the Halloween store, so it's not anything to
Yeah.
worry about yet.
Which which is another big the Halloween store is big in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As well. It's a lot of interaction mechanics, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that wolf mask.
Yeah, like I love that they did such a good job compressing everything into this episode and
Mm-hmm.
combining and like still putting all these little game nods in there. And yeah, they just did it so well.
Mm-hmm. And this scene plays, you understand why Ellie loves this girl so much. She's
Mm-hmm.
able to get her out of her head. She's able uh to let her be herself by getting her onto the jewelry counter. I don't remember what it was. It's a counter. Yeah.
But she goes back and they kind of like reconcile their differences, and she accepts that Riley has to do what she has to do. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's really mature of her
Mm-hmm.
to be like, I understand now that you've explained it to me, like I understand why you have to do this.
Yeah, because again, Ellie's smart. Ellie's
Yeah.
really, really smart. And just the way this scene plays, Riley, suddenly they're both brave, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they would be so brave if they both didn't know at this point that it was their last night.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
and so the way that Riley is able to get Ellie out of herself and just to gives her a chance to just be herself with Riley
Mm-hmm.
by getting her up on the merch counter and dancing is just good shit, man.
Yeah, it's good. And like even though they have the masks on, you can still see everything, like just through
Hmm.
the body language that
Yeah.
Ellie's feeling, and that this is such fantastic acting,
Hmm.
really. Like I loved it. It's so
Me
good.
too. Me too. Her Ellie's line "Don't go." I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was in the video game, but there's this performance is just
It's so
so
good.
good.
Yeah.
And there's like a hint of Storm Reed did such a good job. There's like a hint of cockiness to her when she says she won't. She's like, ah, there it is. I
Mm-hmm.
got what I came here for. Ellie doesn't want me to go. Just
Uh-huh.
just beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, like she's, they handled it's like straight from the gameplay. Like
Hmm.
another scene that's like word for word, shot for shot, but it's so the acting is just so good.
Hmm.
Like it's so powerful, I think is the word
Hmm.
I'm looking for, where
Hmm.
it just captures it so well and what they're going through and within moments like that's it.
Yeah.
That moment
Uh,
is over.
the feeling behind that kiss, you feel everything
Mhm.
that they feel, and they're both so different and both so similar. It's just really well done.
Yeah,
It's just a
it
really
is.
well done kiss.
Yeah. Um,
I thought the kiss was handled really well.
mhm,
Every emotion that they felt, you feel. It's like this burst of adrenaline,
mhm.
um, the sudden finding of courage,
Yeah,
and the joy of the acceptance from one another
right.
is amazing.
Yeah.
But of course, we can't stay in this happy moment
No. Because
because a
why
stalker
would
comes
we?
around the corner.
Oh, yeah, I like how quick Riley is to like protect Ellie
Hmm.
and just tells her like you have to run.
Hmm.
And she really does her best in this moment to protect her and get them out of there, but it's not enough unfortunately
Yeah.
because they're just too
This,
fast.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone. Hold on.
Oh,
Uh, and also, Mr. Stalker's too fast, but also, like, I don't know.
Mr.
Mr.
Stalker.
Stalker. Mr. Mushroom's too fast. And but also, how much in reality, how much experience do either of them have with the infected themselves?
Yeah.
Probably none.
You get an impression that infected just aren't a big deal because they don't even bring that up as like a method of death when Ellie's being sat down and scolded in the beginning.
Right. It all of the emphasis goes on fireflies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like
Um,
that's the problem. That's
you
infected.
might get shot in the head by a firefly if you don't straighten
Mm-hmm.
out.
Right.
That's an interesting point that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think to bring up before. Is like, yeah, all the emphasis is put on the enemy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not on
Right.
the infected anymore. Like,
Yeah.
so who knows? Like, they may have never even seen one before. This could be their first encounter with
Exactly. It's
one.
just kind of a concept.
Yeah. I mean, even when you go back to like episode um uh 2 or technically 3 where Ellie's like I've been bit by one of these things and it didn't do that to me. Like
Right.
the way she says it, like I get the impression that's her first encounter ever
And
with
there's
infected.
also like just rumors about clickers. There's
Mhm.
rumors about bloaters, but
Right.
she says it with an excitement of someone who hasn't
Mhm.
who doesn't really think that that's real.
Right. Yeah. So there's just so much of the world that like people find a safe space and they stay in
Hmm.
it and they don't have to deal with what's out there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think too, like, uh this isn't super relevant, but like, of course, Riley can't get a headshot.
Mhm.
She's a kid with probably not much experience with a weapon, but also it's
Yeah.
like hard to get a headshot.
Yeah.
And I like that that's something that they've emphasized too in this show is like
Mhm.
Joel couldn't kill the clickers with a single shot like you can in the
Right.
video game, stuff like that. So
Yeah. Definitely.
yeah. But yeah, Riley ends up not being able to to kill the stalker,
Mhm.
and Ellie is the one, which I was a little bit surprised by for some reason, but Ellie's the one that kills him.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's kind of what she did in the game too. Is she just stabs the hell out of one of them that's
Hmm.
attacking Riley in the game too.
Yeah,
So,
interesting too. Going back to a second ago when we were talking about how not the emphasis wasn't never put on the infected, is like she's gut stabbing him.
Mm-hmm.
Like she doesn't know how to kill him until she, stabs him in the head.
Right.
So just interesting.
I think her reaction, like again, she kind of has like a laughing reaction to them being out of the situation, and she thinks that they've gotten out unscathed, when
Yeah.
in reality that's not the case at all.
Yeah. I pause. I made James rewind and pause several times because I was like, "There's something in that bite," and I was right. There's a tendril coming out of Ellie's bite on her arm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I thought that I imagined it, but I made him go back and you see it slithering into the bite. It's, dude, fucked me up.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, you gotta rewatch it.
Oh.
Ha 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 ha. Ooh, okay. I don't know if they're gonna I don't know if they're gonna like explain that any further at this point in the show. But it's like it's like it takes root in there and
then it
like
grows
pulls
upward.
itself in.
Yeah.
Like it pulls itself in and starts multiplying. Like that's what I imagined in my head, and that's why I got so fucking grossed out.
It's gross.
It's gross.
Cool.
Ellie doesn't realize at first because of all the adrenaline, I'm sure, that she is
Mm-hmm.
bitten, and it's Riley's. This is interesting. Is Riley looks sad but resigned,
Mm-hmm.
and Ellie's reaction is completely different.
Yeah.
Ellie is devastated,
Mm-hmm.
and the only thing that stops her for a moment. God damn it, Bella Ramsey's good in this episode.
Yeah.
The only thing that stops her spiraling for a second is that Riley shows her that she's been bitten too.
Mm-hmm.
And for the next amount of time that we have with them, the short amount of time that we have is such a good character differentiation between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Is Ellie's reaction is, I'm gonna smash everything, I'm devastated, I'm angry, and Riley's resigned to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's just accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just really sad.
It's so sad. But her little monologue at the end there is just really deftly handled by Storm Reid.
Yeah, like she finds strength in even the worst moment to kind of give Ellie some kind of comfort or peace or whatever. What she thinks is both of their last moments, when in reality it's really just her last moments.
Yes.
Which is really sad to think how differently could have ended if it had just been Ellie that had been bitten. Could have been a completely different outcome. You know.
Why'd you have to say that? That makes me even more sad. So there is a trope out there that's getting so there's a trope that's getting more attention. There's more of a conversation around it that is bury your gays.
Yeah.
And I would like you to talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this is something that's recurring, and it's just been since what seems like the late 19th century. It's a constant trope of the gay people die, one of the gay people dies, and then the other one lives, etc., etc. There's never happiness. It's always despair. And it's becoming an issue, I think, again. Especially, like, there's been an influx of LGBT material, but the story and the trope isn't necessarily changing, which is a problem. Not that I'm faulting Last of Us for any of this. I still think this is a great story, and I think that they handled. I don't see the episode with Bill and Frank as a tragedy, personally. I think that subverts the tropes. I think they had a long and happy life, and they chose death on their own terms, and I don't think it fits into this bury your gays trope at all. I think that's like subverting expectations in the bury your gays tragedy trope, and I think this one. This here unfortunately adheres to it. But I think it needs to be talked about because it's still like this ongoing constant issue in media these days. Basically, and I'll quote, there's actually been like a research paper written on it, which is really convenient, and they studied a plethora of different works, like novels, plays, films, TV, from different eras, like all the way back to like the 1890s, all the way up to as recently as 2016. And they did a great job, like kind of like showing where these came from and why they're still an issue today, and how we need to like kind of step away from that, because when it comes down to it, this trope is rooted in suppression, unfortunately. So I'm going to quote it a little bit here. It's called Bury Your Gays, History, Usage, and Context, written in 2017 by Haley Hulan, who is a McNair scholar. So,
and if possible, we'll link this in the show notes.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely link this in on the YouTube upload for sure, and the podcast description, because it's just really important to acknowledge this. Anyway, I'll start off with a direct quote, because it starts off saying, recently, because of an influx of gay characters dying on television since the 26 TV season, specifically, that's when this became an issue again. And if you look at 2016, what happened in like 2014, 2015, gay marriage became legal. An influx which seemingly began with the death of, I'm not going to say a character, but they were a character in CW Network's young adult drama, The 100. So that's where this kind of like took point and took off and became an issue again. I'm going to quote one part specifically, because I think this is where this mainly derives from. It says, those Christian themes were largely in place so that studios could, at the very least, appear to be operating with the preview of the production code put in place in 1930 to keep Hollywood films from corrupting, as they put it in quotes, the general populace, especially children. And for anyone that doesn't know, the production code was put in place in the 30s by Hollywood, because in the 20s, like the late 10s and the 20s, they kind of, Hollywood, before it was Hollywood, kind of went wild. Like it was a little like the Wild West of film, where there was nothing in place at that time. Like a lot of people think films started off conservative, with not showing those kind of things. Like if you look, they didn't show men shirtless until like, I think like the late 50s, early 60s. But if you look at films from the 10s and 20s, there was no suppression there either. It was only once they put this production code into place that things began to get really conservative and like suppressed again. Like there's like silent films where you see gay and lesbian couples like holding hands or kissing and things like that, and it's crazy to see it from that time period, where you think it wasn't a thing, but it, like at least shown in media, but it most definitely was at the time, until this production code. Anyway, I'll continue. It was not until 1933, arguably in reaction to the way Sign of the Cross mixed Christian themes with abnormal sexuality and frank violence, that the production code administration was put in place to enforce the code standards. That enforcement deeply affected films that were actually trying to portray positive queer representation, as flawed and ununiformed as that representation may have been. So that goes hand in hand with that, where basically, and I'll lead into it, this next point here, the reason for queer, goddamn.
Can't even get through an academic study. I can't take you anywhere.
The reason for queer characters being killed off through the invocation of bury your gays trope vary both by time period and depending on who is writing the narrative. Queer authors, working from the end of the 19th century up until the middle of the 20th century, kill off their queer characters as a point of safety. They are protecting themselves, their publishers, and readers from laws and social mandates against the endorsement of homosexuality. So basically, these tropes started to exist because if they didn't kill off their queer characters then and gave them a happy ending, then people would see the author or artist themselves as queer, and they would be persecuted for it, either by being thrown in jail, fined, or killed. So that's where this trope actually comes from, and it's an issue. Like it goes deep into the history of filmmaking and writing and playwrights and all of that, and it sadly still exists today. And we see it here, unfortunately, in 2023, and it's still happening.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, I think it's a good story still, and I think it serves a function. It's just unfortunate that it still is so ingrained in society that this is how these scenes unfold for these characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say that it still serves a function. It's still a good story.
Hmm.
What function does it serve?
I think it's a catalyst for Ellie as a character and kind of like the beginning of her pain, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but like that's because she goes through this survivor's guilt throughout this entire story. And this
Mm-hmm.
is just the beginning of it. I think that's like a recurring theme in the building of her character. First with Riley, then Tess, then Henry and Sam. And you just see that kind of like manifesting in her just as the story goes on.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think, let's say, for whatever reason, they decided to make her a straight character. I still think they would have done this bit anyway with
Yeah.
whoever that, like, I think it's just, I don't think it necessarily is adhering to that trope on purpose. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just her character and what her character is going through and how she develops as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And her line in an earlier episode, everyone that I've ever cared for
mhm.
has either left me or died.
Yeah.
That I think that line is something that goes on in her head constantly.
Yeah.
And that's why at the end of this episode, we see that she can't leave Joel.
Yeah, it's such a basis for her character. Like both literally like her as a character and then her character as a
Mm-hmm.
person. Um and I think you just see what an impact it has on her. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why she won't leave Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though he's not he's a father paternal figure to her, he's still a close bonded relationship to her.
He's still a loved one.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why Riley's speech to her at the end of her life kind of echoes in Ellie's mind and why she just keeps going and won't give up on him because
Mm-hmm.
she was forced to give up on Riley and Riley
Yeah.
didn't stay alive with her
Yeah.
and she just can't go through that again right now with
Yeah.
Joel.
Yeah, I think she probably sees this as a potential redemptive moment for her,
Yeah.
because that guilt has manifested in so many ways for her, and I think
Hmm.
this is a moment where she's like, if I don't leave him, then he won't leave me. He won't be forced to leave me. This is my moment.
Yeah, exactly. And he's there because of her. And so
Mm-hmm.
like that's just more guilt she would feel, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if he dies.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And she finds uh, a nice little nod to the game. She's rummaging through these cupboards and finds string. I think
mhm.
it's like embroidery cloths.
Yeah, she gets thread.
Um, uh, to um, to go and try to patch. I was gonna call him Pedro. Go and patch Joel up.
Yeah.
And this the single tear
Mhm.
from Joel killed me.
Yeah.
The tightening of the handhold killed me,
Mhm.
and just and this might be reading too far into it, but just the symbolism of her patching up a terrible situation was
Mhm.
really heavy to me.
Yeah. No, so good. I just wish she'd put some alcohol on that wound.
I know she doesn't have any.
I
She
know
used
she
it for
doesn't.
Molotov cocktails.
I mean, I know where that's going, and she'll probably get the antibiotics she
Yeah.
needs, but I'm just like, oh, he is going so
Yeah, I'm
septic.
like, oh, there's a lot of blood and dirt on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, so that's where we're left.
mhm.
And the next episode is like smacks right into winter, which is our favorite segment of the video game.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I can't wait. It's gonna be really good. This episode was astounding as
Mhm.
usual. They keep taking those right steps, and I
Yep.
cannot wait for the next
Oh,
episode.
I can't wait. And it's gonna be so good. And so intense.
So dark.
Dark.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching another episode of the Bros and Cons podcast. We'll be back when, bro?
Probably Monday, Tuesday.
Okay, we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah.
Uh, Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.